than to take personal responsibility for something. It's really nothing new. This has been going on since the beginning of time, at least as it relates to humanity. Blame shifting has been going on since the Garden of Eden. And in case you aren't familiar with this story, let me just summarize some events from Genesis chapter 3, where God places man in the center of a beautiful garden. It is paradise. He doesn't have a care or a concern in the world. And God also takes from Adam's side DNA and makes a woman, Eve. And there's one thing that God had instructed Adam to begin with, and that was that he was free. The emphasis is on freedom. He was free to eat of any of the trees of the Garden of Eden, except one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the only reason why God put that one tree in the garden is so that the relationship that mankind would have with God would be based on the freedom of choice, would be a love relationship and not something out of obligation or coercion. And yet, the one thing that God said, don't eat of it, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die, meaning literally the dying process will begin. The human race will experience death, which we weren't intended to experience. The one thing that God had warned them, don't eat of this one tree. They ate. And when God called them to account, he started with Adam. And I'm going to paraphrase the conversation. He said, Adam, what'd you do that for? And Adam said, well, the woman that you gave me, she's the one. You know, Lord, I'm not sure I wasn't really into the whole thing anyway, but you said, let's make a woman out of your side. It still hurts. You know what I'm saying to you, Lord? And I was kind of opposed to the whole idea, but then I was just like, whoa, man, come on. And then you said, okay, let's name her that. And so woman came along, and then she just messed me up. You know what I'm saying to you, Lord? She just messed me up. And by the way, you gave her to me. I mean, that's in Genesis chapter 3. He says to God, you, the one you gave to me. And so he blame shifts. And then God says to Eve, all right, what about you? And she's like, well, the serpent that this serpent guy here, this serpent, the Satan, he just tempted me. And Satan is just there like, yeah, I got nobody else to blame. There's nobody around. And so it's not like this is new. Blame shifting has been going on since the Garden of Eden. We're all experts at it. Now, there's a story in the Hamrick household that we like to tell every so once in a while. Do you have one of these stories in your family where you just like to bring it up every once in a while just to laugh at somebody in your family about it? So friends, listen, if you can't laugh at yourself, laugh at other people. But anyway, so there's this one story where we get together and we laugh at Tyler. He's sitting over here in the front row. And here's the story. We all laugh at each other for different reasons, but here's his story. So this is about 10 years ago when the kids were still teenagers living at home. And I had a little geo-tracker that I bought from a guy on the street. And it was just a fun little car around town, had a soft top. And so I'd pull the whole top off when summer months would come. And so we all piled into the little geo-tracker and we're on our way to the community swimming pool. And so Terry was up in the front with me, 3 kids squished in the back, okay, all teenagers. Now, before we left the house, Terry had given Tyler a brand new pair of flip-flops. You know this story, right, Tyler? Yeah, all right, he knows the story because we remind him every once in a while. Gave him a brand new pair of flip-flops, really nice. Hey, thanks, Mom, love the flip-flops. Jump in the car, off to the pool we go. When we got to the pool, because the top was off of the tracker, he decided, I'm going to just jump off the side of the car instead of, going through the door. Why bother? There's no top. I'm going to jump off the side. And when he jumped off the side, the front flap of his new flip-flop caught on the edge, the rim of the side of the car, and he tumbled out and spilled out. And we're all looking at him, and he gets up, and he says, thanks a lot, Mom. And we're like, what? Thanks a lot, man. Because if you hadn't given me these flip-flops, I would not have fallen out of the car. So that's our fun story with Tyler. Give him a hand, everybody. That's our fun story with Tyler. And so, to this day, we're like, remember when you fell out of the car and you blame Mom for giving you the flip-flops? But we're all experts at this. This is the kind of thing that we do. And if we don't blame somebody, we will make excuses for ourselves. And we'll talk about our parents, and we'll talk about our family of heritage, and we'll make excuses for ourselves. We'll say things like, well, I am the way I am because my mom never really gave me any hugs. Or mom wasn't around, dad wasn't around, dad was a drinker, and so, or we'll say things about our own heritage. Well, the reason I drink a little too much is because I'm Irish. You know how the Irish are, You know how, oh, it's magically delicious, and so we're drinkers because we're Irish. Or oh, I know I have a temper, but I'm Italian. That's just the way Italians are. I know I'm cheap because that's the way Scots are. I'm Scottish, and so we say these kinds of things. I know I'm irritable, but that's because I had some low blood sugar. I just need to eat some food. And so on it goes. And we love to make excuses. And we love to blame. Benjamin Franklin once said, quote, "He that is good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else." A journalist by the name of Sidney J. Harris, who died many years ago, he said, quote, "We have not passed that subtle line between childhood and adulthood until we move from the passive voice to the active voice. That is, until we have stopped saying, 'It got lost,' and say, 'I lost it.'" His point is well taken. He said, kids talk in passive tense. It got lost. I don't know. But adults own it. Should. We should say, "I lost it." It's the difference between a childhood and adulthood. The idea of taking responsibility for something. See, the sociology of responsibility basically says today, it's not your fault. Blame somebody else. That's just false. The psychology of responsibility says if you take responsibility, it empowers you. If you blame others, you victimize yourself. Well, there's some truth to that. But the theology of responsibility says every person is accountable to God for his or her own life. Period. Every person is accountable to God for his or her own life. This is what chapter 3 is about here in Ezekiel. If you still have your Bibles open there to Ezekiel chapter 3, notice in verse 17 where God starts out by saying to Ezekiel, "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore, hear a word from my mouth and give them warning from me." Now notice there in verse 17, he addresses Ezekiel as Son of Man. That is also, by the way, a title for Jesus more than 80 times throughout the Gospels. But that is a messianic title. That's why Jesus uses it about himself in the Gospels. In this usage here in the book of Ezekiel, it's really God just simply saying to Ezekiel, you are a man among men. You are a representative of the people. He refers to Ezekiel as Son of Man 93 times in the book of Ezekiel. You are Son of Man. You are a representative of the people to speak on my behalf to warn the people about their sins, which is why God calls him there in verse 17 a watchman. He says, I have made you a watchman. Circle that word watchman. Now, a watchman back in the day was one who stood guard on the top of the city wall. At some point in the city wall or in the tower of the city wall, in order to alert people, to sound a warning regarding any approaching danger from without or any problem from within. And so God uses the term figuratively. He says to Ezekiel, you're a spiritual watchman. In effect, what I want you to do is I want you to sound the alarm. I want you to warn people that you live with and that you work with, that you love, that I love. I want you to warn them that if they continue in their sin, they're going to be responsible. They're going to be held accountable. And so warn them, do your part. And so Ezekiel was tasked with one objective, to sound a warning to those who are perishing with the hope that they would listen, turn, and be saved. And in fact, God even says to Ezekiel, I'm going to hold you personally responsible for your part. And your part is, I want you to sound the warning. And if you don't sound the warning, you're going to be accountable for your part in that. He says, now, the people are responsible to me in regards to their relationship with me, but you're going to be responsible to me also in regards to your relationship with me. And if I tell you to warn people and you don't warn them, okay, I'll deal with them separately, but I'm also going to hold you responsible for not obeying me either.